Hello everyone, welcome to our video presentation, The Contemporary World about Chapter 12, Dealing with Resisting and the Future of Globalization. So dealing with globalization. Given limited space, this section will only cover dealing with the economy, the polity, and the healthcare. So we are focused on economy. Economy globalization integrates economies, allowing for free trade and investment but also increasing competition and inequality. Nations need policies to enhance competitiveness while protecting vulnerable sectors. So second is polity. Polity globalization impacts political system by influencing governance and structures, fostering international cooperation, and sometimes challenging national sovereignty. Governments must balance global commitment with domestic priorities. So the third one is healthcare. Healthcare globalization facilitates the spread of medical knowledge, technology, and resources, but also exposes countries to global health risks such as pandemic. Nations must invest in robust healthcare system and international collaboration. So next, dealing with the global economy. From the perspective of that which needs to be responded to, no issue gets more attention, undoubtedly, mainly because of the profound economic inequality in the world than the economy. So the global economy demands responses to issues like inequality trade, imbalances, and exploitation of labor. Governments and organizations must address this through fair trade, equitable policies, and sustainable development practices to reduce disparities. For example, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals focus on reducing poverty and promoting economic equality through initiatives like microfinance programs to improve small business and developing nations. So next is protectionism. So government intervention in order to encourage domestic production. So protectionism involves government policies such as tariffs, subsidies, and import restriction to shield domestic industries from foreign competition and promote local production. So, for example, the United States imposed tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminum to protect its domestic steel industry and reduce reliance on imports. So next is fair trade. Fair trade concerned for the social, economic, and environmental well-being of marginalized small resources. So, fair trade promotes ethical practices by ensuring marginalized small producers receive fair prices, better working conditions, and support for sustainable development. It emphasizes equity and global trade relationships. So, for example, Fair Trade International certified coffee farmers in developing countries, ensuring they earn a fair price for their coffee while encouraging environmentally sustainable farming practices. So, next is helping the bottom billion. The most common way of looking of economic inequality in the world is the north and the south, core and periphery, or between the developed and less developed areas of the world. So, helping the bottom billion refers to the poorest people in the world, often in underdeveloped regions. Effort focus on reducing inequality through targeted aid, investment in infrastructures, and policies promoting economic growth in these areas. So, for example, the World Bank International Development Association provide low-interest loans and grants to the poorest countries to fund projects in education, healthcare, and infrastructure, helping uplift marginalized populations. So, next is dealing with political globalization. Space constraints will limit us to the issue of accountability and transparency, as well as special attention to Transparency International. So, accountability and transparency is political. Globalization demands accountability and transparency in global governments to ensure ethical decision making and reduce corruption in international institutions. So, next is Transparency International, or TRAN-TI, is a global organization that fights corruption by promoting transparency, exposing abuses of power, and advocating for stronger anti-corruption measures worldwide. So, for example, Transparency International publishes the Corruption Receptions Index, ranking countries based on perceived levels of public sector's corruption, guiding guiding forms and policies changes. So next is accountability. So accountability in a world of increasing global organization, especially in this case political organization, the issue of accountability is increasingly important transparency. So accountability is ensure global political organizations are responsible for their actions and decisions, maintaining legitimacy and trust, as a lack of accountability can lead to inefficiency, corruption, or decisions that harm marginalized groups. So, example, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, has been criticized for lack of accountability in imposing austerity measures on borrowing countries, reforms such as including more representation from developing nations, and to make the IMF more accountable. So, next is transparency. So, transparency organization of all types, including and perhaps especially political organization, are generally inclined to secrecy on many matters, and this means that such of what they do is not transparent. So, transparency involves openness in decision making, policies and operations, allowing public scrutiny and reducing corruption. A lack of transparency can erode trust and enable unethical practices.
Good day everyone, my name is James Brian U. Bautista and I am the second reporter of our group. So, let's begin. Transparency International, or TI. Transparency International is a global non-governmental organization, or INGO, established in 1992 by Peter Eigen. Eigen, a former World Bank official, became disillusioned with the corruption he observed during his tenure. TI is committed to combating corruption worldwide by promoting transparency, integrity, and accountability in government, business, and civil society. Resisting globalization. Globalization, or rather globalizations, have created enemies and generated resistance for innumerable reasons. This concept refers to the various forms of opposition that have emerged against globalization due to its perceived negative effects. These include the exploitation of workers, cultural homogenization, environmental degradation, and the dominance of powerful multinational corporations. Resistance movements often argue that globalization exacerbates inequality and marginalizes less developed nations. Next is local resistance. The, The actions of local groups or communities face severe limitation in terms of their chances of having an impact on globalization from above. Local communities or groups sometimes resist the effects of globalization that negatively impact their livelihood, cultures, or environments. However, their efforts are often limited in scope and effectiveness as they struggle to influence the global systems and institutions driving globalization. A social movement, Donatella Della Porta, along with several colleagues, studied two specific Italian protests against globalization. A social movement, this concept refers to the study of specific protests or organized efforts to resist globalization. Donatella Della Porta and her colleagues analyzed two protests in Italy to understand the dynamics of such movements, exploring how they mobilize and challenge global forces. Next is more formal social movements. Those who resist globalization often use globally similar philosophical, bureaucratic, and technological defense. So, more formal social movements is unlike informal protests, formal social movements opposing globalization adopt structured strategies and use similar methods worldwide. These include philosophical arguments, bureaucratic resistance, and technological tools to organize and defend their causes effectively, as outlined by anthropologist Ronald Nizen. So next is World Social Forum and Cyber Activism. The existence of the internet has given those opposed to globalization in general, or some specific aspect of it, a powerful tool to mount their opposition on a regional and even a global basis. The World Social Forum, or WSF, is an international gathering of anti-globalization activists providing a platform to discuss alternatives to the dominant global economic model. Cyber activism, enabled by the internet, amplifies these efforts by connecting activists globally, enabling campaigns and organizing protests through digital tools. Is the resistance to globalization significant? While resistance globally is generally strong and diverse, such resistance is to a large extent dismissed by the supporters of globalization and believers in its continued, if not inevitable, expansion. While resistance to globalization is strong and diverse across different regions and groups, its significance is often downplayed by globalization proponents. Supporters of globalization view its expansion as inevitable and believe that opposition will not significantly alter its trajectory. So that is all for my report, and thank you for listening. Babush!
Good day everyone, my name is Aziz Imberdago. For today's topic, we'll be discussing the future of globalization. We'll be ending the topic titled with the future of globalization. Although we see the heading is clear, which we are talking about the complex scenario that involves multiple features of globalization. Given this statement according to the book about the futures of globalization, this will not offer bold predictions about the future of it, but rather will be content with ruminations about and some sketchy scenarios on them. Globalization has many forms economic, cultural, political. Since it's diverse, it can't be predicted at once. Globalization has many forms: economic, political, etc. Since it's diverse, it can't be predicted at once. Consider globalizations like a person's life, path, career, relationships, habits. Each path unfolds uniquely, making it impossible to predict a single future outcome for their entire life. Consider it as you, as a person who is uncertain about the various things I mentioned, like career, relationship, and hobbies. Ni isa sa atin is walang makakapagsabi kung anong mangyayari sa hinaharap. With this, what I've said, even if you're poor right now, it does not decide the future of you, or rather it doesn't it does not. Let's say that if you're rich or poor right now, it does not guarantee the status you have right now is magiging ganun pa din near in the future. Okay. Moving in the Mad Max scenario, this serves as a warning or serves as a shape by neglect and mismanagement. For example, the mismanagement of resources, where like us, people who compete to the society, if the crisis arises, di natin siya masisisi if magiging ganito, kasi that's the human nature, where we compete for our survival, which this might change our behavior. And also, this movie portrayal of chaos, survivalist behavior, and the resources competition underscores the potential consequences of unchecked environmental degradation or the misallocation of the resources, where this chapter aligns the focus on collapse scenarios and their broader implication for human civilization. If paano ba to how will it affect the human civilization if this kind of scenario or this kind of hierarchy will happen.